name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way we live. If you like today's episode, as always, make sure to rate the program and give us a follow. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting an award-winning procurement pro from the public development sector, working within construction and development for the past 15 years of effectively leading and managing large-scale and complex project procurements in development and construction. She is serving currently as a procurement leader at London Legacy Development Corporation, Adwoa Owusu-Banahene. Adwoa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sam. That was an introduction. Thank you for having me.
Well, we have to do you justice for sure if we're having you on the show. We're happy to have you. Thanks for taking the time. And I want to start with a question that we ask a lot of our guests that we have on. What exactly does sourcing and procurement mean to you?
That's a very interesting and important question. And for me, procurement and sourcing is an opportunity to solve and contribute to solving some of the country and the world's biggest problems and challenges. So some of the projects that I've worked on, so at the moment with the London Legacy and also supporting the Greater London Authority, we're looking at development, community development, regeneration that will provide affordable housing, which will put an end to some level of homelessness for people within east of London. We're also ensuring that the housing level will be of a high quality and sustainable, ensuring that energy poverty is reduced, but then we're also contributing to net zero and the climate emergency. Other projects that I've worked on previous contracts and assignments included, supporting the Department of Health and Social with the development and production and construction of the laboratory that was testing and looking at the COVID-19 vaccines and tests that were coming through. So at the peak of the pandemic, we were working endlessly trying to construct a laboratory that would take in a day quantity of 200,000 tests that were coming through. So These are big projects that are contributing. So some life-changing, some emergency, climate emergency, and then also some of the issues with fraud, modern slavery, and corruption. So for me, procurement is an opportunity to contribute to solving some of the problems and challenges that we're dealing with at the moment. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. I don't see procurement as just buying goods and services. It's more than that. It's about contribute to better outcomes, better life chances for communities, for people, and for society at large.
And we see, in top performing procurement teams that we work with and a lot of those that I've had on the show talk about this concept of having the outcome in mind, right? Because I think that otherwise procurement becomes this very transactional function in an organization or that's what the traditional view of, as you said, buying is, right? One of the reasons we started the show, right? How does the way that we source and procure impact the way we live and in the industry that you're within and also some of the projects you're working on, which I want to definitely dive deeper into. It's absolutely impacting the way that people live. So really excited to talk some more. I'm curious, what made you decide to work in procurement? Did you choose the role or did the role choose you?
Another interesting question. So unlike most people I've heard talk about their career journey in procurement, I would say I chose the role. I did not fall into it. I started off my career about 15 years ago in operations engineering at that time. So I came out of university and joined a graduate role, which was operations engineering within the manufacturing industry. And as part of that, you did 4 rotations, one in supply chain, one in engineering, one in quality management, and one on the shop floor. And those were all great experiences. And as part of my supply chain experience or rotation, I was working on some fantastic projects, looking at how we source and also looking to streamline our supply base. And so I had opportunity, and a lot of the products the company that I worked for at that time used to manufacture lighting for industry. So they manufacture lighting for hospitals and industry. So, a lot of the electronics and the metal that we bought came from Far East. So I had the opportunity to travel to China. I went to Taiwan. I went to South Korea, with my organization on the projects that we're doing, looking at supplier audits, supplier assessment, looking at manufacturing practices, ensuring that the material that we're buying is of high quality, and also ensuring that their ISO systems were properly set up. So
what an awesome experience as a young professional as well, to be able to do so.
Absolutely. So as you can tell, at that not tender age, but at that young age, for me, that was a dream job. I was like, yes, of course. That is so. When you get to the end of the rotation of the graduate scheme, you get to specialize in one area. And of course, for me, it was a no-brainer. It was going to be supply chain because I wanted to travel, I wanted to see the world, and also the impact of the work that we were doing for me at that time was fantastic. It was incredible. So I chose to go down supply chain. So at that time, it was more wider than just the procurement side. So I was involved in inventory management. I was involved in stock control, logistics, or end-to-end supply chain. So that was, and then part of that was procurement. Then I did a period in supply chain, and then I was drawn to procurement as a specialist.
So let's double click there. I mean, so what was it that made you niche yourself or specialize yourself in the procurement space? I mean, obviously, you obviously have supply chain generalist, capabilities, but what made you decide to be more of a specialist in the procurement space then?
So I saw procurement as being the strategic function that interacts with all the different departments, has knowledge of all the different departments, and is really able to influence decisions and influence outcomes. So when you look at the end-to-end value chain, not just downstream, but then also upstream, procurement touches every stage of that value chain. And for me, it was incredible to be part of an organization where right from, product specification or service specification, you get the opportunity to be part of that and see that come through and come to fruition and become a product or service where a user can use, and, you see the outcomes that they achieve. For me, that was an incredible to see, and I had to be part of that specialism.
And I could tell that it gets you excited, and that's an awesome summary, I think, of why a lot of people love the role. So that's amazing. So you then have had a pretty long-standing career now in construction and development. Of course, that particular space has some nuances within it. I'm curious, how do you find the construction and development space to be a bit different than other industries? Also, how do you feel like public procurement maybe differs a bit from private procurement?
Yeah, so if we pick the latter part of your question first, which is how does private procurement and public procurement differ? So public procurement, which I've been involved in for the past 10 years, and I love doing because, again, it's procurement with a purpose, is providing and delivering public services that really impact the day-to-day lives of communities and people with taxpayers' money. So each end is ensuring that what we're doing has an impact, but then also not only on the user, but on those that are funding. So
because
the service that
every taxpayer is in fact a shareholder in that procurement. Yeah, yeah,
absolutely. So when I'm working on a project, when I'm working on a procurement, I'm a funder in that procurement. So for me, there's nothing better to do to make sure that it's efficient, effective. I don't need any more motivation than to know that actually my money is going into this and also is going to be impacting somebody else's life. And I think with public procurement, you see that even more evidently because of the nature of services and the way that it impacts. So from your local council services of education through to the construction of buildings and homes for people, the impact is evident, and because of the nature and because of the fact that you're using public funds, there is more scrutiny. There is more transparency. There is more need to be open, and there's more need to be to ensure that there's competition and you are enabling value for money. So, from a public procurement perspective, the hat that we always have on when we're engaging in strategy and we're engaging with market and stakeholders is ensuring that we're delivering value for money for the public purse, but then at the same time, we're being as open and transparent as we can be so that the public sees or can see what we're doing, and have trust in public services and in the government. And so in the private sector, there's more of an opportunity to deliver service without really a focus on value for money or a focus on competition, because the key focus is profitability and generating revenue on the private sector side. So there's more of an opportunity and more of a chance to be innovative sometimes, and we hear that but we're excited because the procurement regs are coming in and it will enable us to be more innovative.
Well, I'm interested. Okay, so let's take that example, because I can agree with you there. And the interesting thing, of course, about public procurement, like you said, you guys maybe aren't working towards the top line of a revenue share of a business, right? But rather you're holding the currency of impact. You're holding the currency of trust to the public, right? And those are pretty significant as well. Do you feel though like public procurement is hindered from innovation? And if so, you see that that's shifting, how do you feel like that's going to shift moving forward?
Fantastic question. Yes, I think historically and traditionally, due to the level of regulation and requirement for process and transparency, it has hindered the opportunity to be more innovative, because there are set rules, there are set procedures, they're prescribed steps and processes that you have to follow. So it doesn't enable the flexibility that you need to be able to generate innovation. But the good news, and we see that that is set to change, because the new procurement regs are coming in. So the Procurement Act 2023 was enacted last year. It comes into force on the 28th of October this year, which the aim and the emphasis on that is to enable flexibility and drive innovation, drive social value, drive better benefits for community, society, and the nation at large. So there is a real emphasis now for public procurement to come out of being the procurement laggards in the innovation space and really start to come to the forefront of innovation, because not like ever before, the public purse is at a tight squeeze due to COVID-19, global forces, inflation, all the other elements that are impacting on the economy now, and public organizations are being asked to deliver more with less, and therefore we must find new ways of delivering more with less. And then when that is coupled with issues of climate change and the need to deliver net zeros and sustainability, and then you're looking at homelessness, there is a lot to deliver with a little funding.
Okay. Woof. All right. A lot to unpack here. I think that the topic of having to do more with less is on everybody's plate right now. So how does one do more with less? I mean, how within procurement, but within really all aspects of the value chain? I mean, do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah. So I think with the need to deliver more with less, it's really being strategic and thinking, as we've started to touch on outcome based from procurement. So rather than being prescriptive, rather than being procedural based, is what outcomes do we need to achieve from what we're setting out to do. So being really clear on what we're setting out to do. And also another element that is going to become very pertinent and very influential in the way we do public procurement going forward is engagement with the market. Because in engaging with the market, understanding the market capability and capacity, and working with the market to really understand what outcomes are needed, how can they set themselves up to better deliver. When we work together as, the buyers and the sellers, and we are in partnership and we're understanding each other's needs and each other's challenges, we can work together to produce better solutions. And so we can do it better for less as well. So I think these two, so really being outcome driven, being solution driven, being benefits driven will ensure that we're doing more for less. We're cutting out some of the waste in the process. And also we're working with industry, we're working with market to really channel resources to deliver what needs to be delivered.
Well put. I'm curious about that particular topic. You mentioned it a bit, right? In your space of development and construction, obviously it's a highly regulated. It's the need for transparency is important. It also means though that the level of competition needs to be there, right? You guys need to go out for public tenders every time you're trying to purchase, things for a new project or whether it's services or goods, I assume, and that's highly regulated. Does that impact the way that you can be able to develop upon your supplier relationships? Have you ever seen that being able to hinder, or do you think also adversely that it can also help your supplier relationships and that collaboration that is, of course, at the core of driving forward, for example, innovation projects?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Historically and traditionally, there had been that caution from public sector organization because of the need to follow procedure and process and to for transparency. It has made public organizations very risk averse into engaging with the market. But in the space that I work at, within the development space and within the construction space, the requirements and the needs are so complex that it cannot be delivered without that interaction with the market. So It has been a tradition that engagement with market is a key pillar, a key driver in enabling us to deliver better outcomes. And as the new procurement regulations are coming in, that is weaved through the procurement regulations. So it's an end-to-end expectation and requirement, not just traditionally, we would do market engagement at the beginning before we enter into the tendering process. We would say that we will engage market. We will seek to understand what capacity is available, what capabilities are available, which to some extent we may use to inform our approach. But we're moving away from that just pre-tender engagement to end-to-end engagement every step of the process, because you cannot deliver the outcomes better and reduce risk for both parties without that ongoing dialogue. So ongoing dialogue is going to become by default in the new procurement regulations to ensure that we're delivering the better outcomes. Even in the competitive environment, is still allowed to ensure that we can work in tandem with real understanding to understand what the constraints are, to understand what opportunities are, and then to deliver solutions that will deliver the opportunities while keeping in mind what the constraints are.
You touch upon something that's really, really interesting there, right? And it goes back to like this traditional mindset of procurement being brought in to watch the bottom line and fulfill POs, right? Buying. You said that your role is transitioning to being end to end, focusing on that life cycle, which is so important. And I'm sure that it's incredibly important in the development space as well. Maybe even more so in a project procurement context than it would be when in a perspective of a more category-led organization. But for those that are listening in today, because there might be some that aren't really familiar with LLDC, do you mind just hitting everybody that's listening with some knowledge of what exact value that your organization is bringing to the development of communities in and surrounding London? You touched on a little bit before, but I'd love if you could just hit the listeners with some knowledge on that.
Yeah, so fantastic. London Legacy Development Corporation is the legacy organisation that was set up to deliver the legacy of the Olympics. So the promises that were made in the bid to win the Olympics, the Legacy Corporation is set up to deliver those promises. And that is to regenerate the East End of London. So where the Olympic Village was, where the Olympic Stadium was, that area was one of the most deprived areas within London. And as a result of the Olympics coming there, it enabled the funding to come into that region. It enabled the resources to come into that region. It enabled the capacity to come into that region, enabled capabilities to come into that region, and then outward investment to also come into that region to really demolish what was once a very derelict location of London, to now bring it into what we call almost the London Central is shifting eastward, because Stratford and now the Westfield Centre that is now there is one of the biggest shopping area and regenerative area within the Europe. And then looking at the housing that has been delivered through the legacy development, the locals and the people that belong to the East End now are able to have high quality homes that they can live in, and also the level of employment that has been generated in the area. So the London Legacy Development Corporation has been spearheading the development and regeneration of that area to ensure that the promises that were made during that Olympic bid are delivered. That's the work of the Development Corporation.
Awesome works, and a real true focus on how procurement, sourcing, supply chain can be able to impact development and impact social value in communities. Do you think that procurement almost has kind of a obligation, a duty to be able to make an impact in local communities?
Absolutely. The procurement is central. Procurement
just to piggyback on that question, sorry, to make it a little bit more succinct, is it something that you guys at LLDC, it's obviously part of your core mission. Maybe how do you work with it actively? How is this part of your core projects that you're working on? Like, does it drive how you make decisions?
Absolutely. So, London Legacy Development Corporation is a government organisation, so it's a public sector organisation. And as a government organisation, with the need to drive better social value, levelling up the playing field and ensuring that there are better life chances, better life outcome, especially coming out of the COVID, there was emphasis on ensuring equality and equity, because I think the COVID pandemic really demonstrated the level of disparity in prosperity of people. And as such, within the public sector, social value is a key driver of every procurement that is delivered now. It's part of policy. So any organisation within the public sector that is delivering procurement has to ensure that procurement has a social value element. As part of the London Legacy Development Corporation, we have even a bigger mission to ensure that social value is part of what we do. And how do we ensure through procurement that we deliver social value? Procurement is, so through policy, we ensure that when we are designing our procurements, we are looking at what are the needs of the local. Each area that we're going to develop in, we are looking at, okay, what's the employment issues that are there? What are the supplier capability within that area? So if the development is a big development, so we need the bigger tier one organizations to be part of it, how can we ensure that the tier three organizations within the locality can feed into the supply chain? Those are key areas. Also, are there, from a training and pipeline of talent development, how do we ensure that there are skills training and we're developing the next generation of developers, of architects, of procurement of the in the society. So it's really important that when we're designing and developing our procurement strategy, we're looking at how we can use this development that we're coming to develop to provide employment, to provide training, to provide access to more opportunities for the local supply chain. And that is part of the strategy that informs what we would call the evaluation criteria. So those are like the test questions that the suppliers have to respond to. So as part of those criteria that we're looking to test and assess, we ask suppliers to tell us how they're going to deliver social value. And our expectation is that the suppliers are plugging into the locality, understanding the needs of the locality, so that they can propose interventions that are evidence-backed to ensure that when they deliver those interventions, they're really going to make the impact that we're seeking to make. So proposals that are coming back are informed through the evaluations criteria that we put forth for social value. Those are evaluated to inform the award. So the selection of any developer.
It's part of your guys' selection criteria even to be able to start working with a supplier in a lot of aspects.
Yeah, so as a public sector organization, part of our selection criteria, part of our award criteria has social value provisions in there. And suppliers, developers, contractors all have to put forward a proposal that demonstrates that the social value aspects that they're going to deliver, how they're going to measure performance, how they're going to monitor performance, and how they're going to evaluate the impact that they are generating. So these are all put into the contract. So they're contractually embedded into the contract to make sure that they can be monitored, they can be managed, and they can ensure that is delivering the outcome and the impact that we want. So from the initial onset, we look at the policy element, we look at the practice of designing our procurement strategy, our procurement process, our selection and evaluation criteria, also the contractual elements of embedding proposal and interventions into the contract, so that we then put into the contract performance or key performance indicators that we will use to monitor performance and measure performance and impact.
Awesome. Great tips there and small nuggets, I think, for people to be able to take away of how they can get inspired and put social value and impact, equity, inclusion at the core of their strategy and processes as well. I'm curious then on the kind of hot topic of diversity, equality, inclusion. It's been a very hot topic in a lot of organizations. Unfortunately, we still see lack of DEI internally in procurement organizations. Generally speaking, if we're talking benchmark, this could, of course, have an impact on DEI and supply chains. I mean, if a business is in that situation, how do you think that they could be able to make a shift? I mean, obviously, LLDC has worked with this yourselves. Do you have any suggestions or tips for businesses out there, practitioners that are listening, that are trying to get inspired?
Yeah, no, I think at the organizational level, the organization top level has to start to take diversity, equality, and inclusion seriously. So at the top level, there has to be policy. It has to be top driven, not bottom
Yeah.
up driven. The organization has to reflect the community that is serving. And, sometimes when we work with organizations, they will say that, oh, we're very diverse and these are our statistics. And when you look at their statistics, the diversity stops at maybe the middle management. When you
Right.
look at the top management and you're looking at the executives, the CEOs, it's not diverse. It doesn't reflect. And representation really, really matters. So if the diversity and equity and inclusion is not supported at the CEO level, at the C-suite level, it is not going to be effective. So one key low-level tip is that the top C-suite have to support diversity initiative, inclusive initiatives, and equity initiatives for it to really kick off and deliver any productivity from there. And then also with that in mind, if there's support at the top, then it enables the recruitment practices to reflect. And I've seen this in LLDC much because they're very much focused on reflecting the community they're serving. And there's a lot of initiatives, there's a lot of drives. So from recruitment to internal activities to networks and communities that are set up to drive the agenda of inclusion. So recruitment practices are really important. And also internal policies. Again, going back to LLDC, I've seen that they have a recruitment policy that the interview panel must be diverse. So, and I've seen to the effect that I've sat on interview panels where traditionally, I'm sure I wouldn't have been asked to sit on if it's not the fact that there's policy mandating that it has to be diverse. So if you've got a team of 5 and whether it's racial, whether it's gender, whether it's age, whatever form of diversity we're looking at, there has to be. So you can't have, excuse me to say, 3 white men on a panel when your team is 3 white men and 2 white women. So your panel has to reflect. So there has to be at least 1 woman to reflect that panel. And I think because of those metrics and those targets, it enables that focus of actions and behaviors that drives diversity and it drives inclusion and activity, and also the environment. So not only the recruitment practices, but then also looking internally at the culture. Because so to really drive inclusion, the culture has to be inclusive. The culture has to be a culture that promotes belonging, that promotes, we love to throw this word around about bringing your whole self to the workplace. Can I bring my whole self to the workplace and feel supported and feel that it's a safe space to be able to work and thrive? And that if that culture does not sustain me being able to work and thrive, it's not inclusive. And I think organizations need to look at their practices, look at their policies internally that promotes the ability for everyone to bring their whole self to work so that they can work and thrive.
And that's the most interesting part of it, not just work, but work and thrive, right? That's the key. That's key. So awesome tips. This has been a really awesome episode. We need to start rounding off, unfortunately. I'm curious, though, before we start rounding off, what are some of the common misconceptions that you see, about procurement in the construction or development space?
Yeah, I think the traditionally, the industry has not really embraced procurement. It has not embraced the power that it has to drive innovation, to drive sustainability, to drive profitability, to drive revenue. And it has been seen as not a professional job, and anybody can do it. So it's almost a bolt-on job for maybe the quality engineer or the quantity surveyor or the designer. Everybody was doing procurement. It wasn't
Right.
really specialized. It wasn't really professionalized. It wasn't really standardized to deliver the outcomes. But we're moving in the right direction. I think organizations are beginning to see the benefits that procurement can deliver. And it's moving procurement from just being a business partner back into the strategic function that it needs to be seen as. And I think there's a lot of emphasis given the challenges, the global challenges with supply chain resilience and
Yeah.
with inflation, with cost of raw material, with lack of labor. Every element of the supply chain needs that emphasis, needs that consideration, needs the analysis, needs the risk assessment to ensure that there is continuity and ensure that it can drive that level of profitability that it needs to drive. So I think now there's enough emphasis, there's enough evidence to support that procurement needs to be a strategic function, and they need to dedicate the investment into talent. They need to they need to dedicate the investment into the technologies, and they need to they need to dedicate the investment to the best practices to really generate the good outcomes that procurement can generate.
Awesome insights and inspiring words, ones that I think that we should round things off on. But before we finish up, Adwoa, I'd love to be able to invite you into a little quick fire round so our listeners can be able to get to know you a little bit more as a person rather than just the procurement pro that you have shown yourself to be today. Someone that's obviously very passionate about the role, and I thank you for sharing your insights. Quick fire questions. One word and or one sentence answers is what we're looking for here. Ready to go?
Okay.
All right, let's get into it. So you have an all expenses paid travel, a vacation with yourself. You can also bring some of your family if you'd like. You're leaving tomorrow morning. Where are you heading, Adwoa?
Bali.
Okay, very nice. If you have the choice, are you heading to a concert or to the theater to see a play?
Theater.
All right. Knowing that, of course, you like theater, you maybe like to read and or listen to podcasts alike. Is there a book or a podcast, something that's on your bedside table or that you're continuously listening to, that you would like to suggest to our listeners?
That's interesting. I listen. I don't listen to podcasts much, but
Okay.
my listening, the things that I listen to are all human performance, how we can perform well, how the brain develops. So people like Brené Brown, Tony Robbins, they are people that are my go-to when I'm listening to anything. Yeah.
Cool to hear. Yeah, Brené Brown is one of our founders' absolute favorites. Everybody in their welcome pack at Kodiak actually gets Dare to Lead as a book once they start at the company. So
Fantastic.
Cool that you named her as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to be able to be on the show today, Adwoa. If people want to reach out or get in touch with you, what's the best way to be able to get in touch?
So they can get in touch through LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and then also through my organization that I run, Tops Consultancy. They can get in touch, info@topsconsultancy.co.uk. That is an avenue that they can also get in touch. So through the consultancy, we support public sector organizations to deliver end-to-end construction procurement projects to ensure value, minimize risk, and deliver the benefits to society. And we also support with training, and we also do contract management. So that's how we work with our public sector organizations.
Very cool. You minimized the risk of this being a bad episode because you drove value the whole way. It is definitely going to be a great one to listen into. And we thank you so much for taking the time to be on today, Adwoa.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a fantastic conversation.